Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the virtual opening of the Mackenzie latest exhibition, Human Capital. This event is currently live streamed on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. Audience is encouraged to interact throughout the evening using the chat box. If you want to create an avatar that you're seeing at the bottom of the screen, you can do so over at twitch.tv/mackenzie.art gallery. My name is Tak Pham, and I am an assistant curator here at the Mackenzie and the curator of the show, Human Capital. I'd like to begin by acknowledging and paying my deep respect to the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and Métis people, and elders and ancestors, past, present, and future, in whose homeland, Treaty 4 territory, the Mackenzie is located on, and this live stream is broadcasted from. I acknowledge and offer deep gratitude to this land and water that supports us as we're gathered here right now together, and I invite you to join me in the acknowledgement, the respect and gratitude. Thank you very much for being here with us tonight virtually for such an exciting occasion. I'd like to thank all the Mackenzie's funders, donors, staff, and volunteers for their ongoing support of our exhibition and programming. We are so grateful for the support of our core funders, the South Saskatchewan Community Foundation, Canada Council for the Arts, Sac Culture, the City of Regina, the University of Regina, and the Saskatchewan Arts Board. This exhibition, Human Capital, is a project that I hold close to my heart. It stemmed not only from my own experience moving to Canada at a young age, but also from the experience of friends, colleagues, acquaintances, and extended connections who understand the danger, the barriers, and the sacrifice that one faces in order to be and remain here in the country that we call Canada. Therefore, this exhibition, Human Capital, presents work that offer insight into the impact of Canada's immigration policies and history, how it treats human as capital, and the role it plays in shaping the complex and contested the formation of a Canadian identity. Canada, like most Western nations, has a long history of immigration campaigns that promise economic prosperity to both the state and immigrants. As a result, Canadian immigration policies have historically focused on maximizing economic contributions while minimizing disruption to the fundamental characters of Canadian populations, as remarked by Canadian Prime Minister Mackenzie King in 1947. Canada's current point-based immigration system, in place in 1967, attempts to provide a non-discriminatory framework for assessing individuals and collectives and directing them to the strategic economic and geographic sectors. Once inside Canada, new immigrants are expected to boost the country's economy by producing more for less. The system has little regard for existing marginalized communities, and it continues to reinforce Canadian values with an ever-growing intake of immigrants, whose admittance is driven primarily by the economic demands of the country. For all these reasons, the exhibition asks, what else is lost when human potential is measured as units of capital? In a search for a comprehensive answer to these questions, the Mackenzie is collaborating with Pride Patch magazine to publish a special issue for the exhibition that will be available digitally. This special digital publication will feature new commissions as well as articles from the Pride Patch archive that look at the issues of immigrant labor in Canada. I'd like to invite you to join us on January 14, 2021 for the launch of the publication. The event will feature a panel discussion with Gabrielle Aladua, a former migrant farm worker and organizers with Justice for Migrant Workers, City of Regina Councillor Andrew Stevens, and artist Julie Big Angle Kiwatuwe from Buffalo Billboard Arts Institute. We will also welcome a reading performance by Erika Izumura, the 2019 winner of Pride Patch Writing in the Margin competition. We are also planning some more exciting auxiliary program for the exhibition, so please visit us on our website, the mackenzie.art, for the most up-to-date information. I'd like to end my introduction tonight by sharing the opening of my essay in the upcoming digital exhibition publication that I have just mentioned. And it goes, I will never stop being puzzled whenever someone asks me where you're from. It is not that I'm offended by the question, but that I'm not sure how to answer it. Having moved to Canada at the age of 15, I have spent almost half of my life here. Despite having gone through many milestones, high school graduation, university, internships, minimum wage jobs, professional career, and many friends and lovers, I still cannot find a satisfactory answer to this, especially when relocation and changes of residence take place every 4 to 5 years for me. The answer becomes trickier when one considers the colonization and displacement of generations of Indigenous folks on this land, which we call Canada, where I have chosen to settle. Answers that give my previous residences in Mississauga, Ottawa, and Toronto feel like a disservice to the collective effort of decolonization that I have pledged with my work. On the other hand, an answer that gives my country of origin is also unsatisfactory because I now share more values in common with my so-called Canadian friends and folks there. In addition to its xenophobic connotations, the question itself is not sufficient to capture the complexity and multiple layers of global migration, a movement of people that began to accelerate with imperialism and continue apace with globalism. For well-intended and curious folks, there are more respectful ways to ask where you're from, with a triggering generation of trauma, discrimination, and oppressions that for marginalized folks, and for well-intended settlers like myself. A better understanding of where my experience and story fit within the making of Canadian identity might provide a potential point of reference for my answer. Hence, the exhibition Human Capital can be perceived as my own process of trying to understand the history and legacy of the many ways of people who have come here before me. Thank you everyone for tuning in this evening. It's a shame that given this current circumstances, we couldn't welcome more folks to come and see the show. We try our best to transport the experience online somehow. For folks who are near us, please come and visit us when it's safe. We'll be here, staying open for now, until further notice, of course. Next up, I'd like to share some documentation of the exhibition, followed by a trailer for Minh Suk Lim, Migrant Dreams, which is currently screened both in the Mackenzie Miniature Theater and on our website. And then we will have a conversation with artist Jeannie Mah about her work in the exhibition. And before I end my introduction tonight, I'd like to acknowledge and give thanks to all the participating artists in the show. So here are some of the names. Lisa Cohen, Brian Jungen with a collaboration from Joanne Linklater, Jeannie Mah, Esma Mohammed, Florence Yi, Shelley Yang, and a special feature from Minh Suk Lim. Enjoy and see you soon.
You have to do it. It's either you do it or you go back to Jamaica.
I have a list of 23 workers. They're really afraid. There's extortion happening.
Terkotak-kotak kamar. Angsuran bayar.
You've told them that you're concerned about the health and safety issue. What do?
They said to you that there's no danger. It's chemical, but it's harmless.
Everybody keep their mouth closed.
Ngeyel tetap minta paspor aku yang asli, yang baru, yang lama. Kenapa harus paspor asli saya masuk di perusahaan?
Does Canada need temporary foreign workers?
I think the quality of the migrant people that are being brought over is something that is a big issue. Who are these people?
Duitnya coporos-coporos. Duitnya anaknya disimpan dhisik. Insufficient fund.
People said, okay, we want to go to the cops, we want to go to the police, we want to tell them everything, we don't care.
They're all ready to resist.
Mau diapain juga gak masalah kalau memang demi kenyamanan saya.
But they need to know that they're not going to lose their jobs.
But what about the accusations of threats?
Karena seperti yang dikatakan orang-orang di sini itu negara hukum kalau di.
They are afraid. They are scared. If them fire you, you have nowhere to go.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the slideshow and the trailer. I hope those photos give you an idea of what the show is going to look like. And we will be sharing more of those photos over the next couple of months and weeks on our social media for folks who are not able to come to a gallery. And having with me here today is Jeannie Mah, and we're sitting right in front of her piece for the show. Jeannie, welcome to the Mackenzie tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming to the opening. We're so lucky that that you are a local artist, so we could make this happen. At least trying to recreate some sort of a familiar opening experience. So, so the piece that we have here of yours is pretty, a big installation and has so many layers that is very personal. And for folks who are watching from afar that might not be familiar with your work, would you mind introducing yourself a little bit? Like Like, who are you? What kind of work do you make, as an artist and your practice?
Mainly a ceramic artist, but I also studied film at the same time. So in a way, I'm kind of a frustrated filmmaker, and I think maybe that's why images show up on my pots, and it's kind of like it's kind of like a montage of a film.
And I know that like you always have like a series of the vases that is, I think, are much more of like a more well-known series of work of yours. Like, how long have you been making ceramic vases?
Well, it's kind of a funny thing. I moved back to Regina 30 years ago, and my own history was the last thing on my mind. I was working on cups that were influenced by French porcelain and Minoan Crete. So I was really talking about ceramics that were about ceramics. But a few years after I came back, I was asked to do something for the City Hall. And the City Hall just happened to be where my father's grocery store was.
Oh, okay.
So that's when I thought, the little grocery store and the pie shop and the watch store and the radio shack behind us and the the home for pregnant women.
Yes.
All that history is now gone. So I wanted to reintroduce onto that geographical site some of the history that had been there and is completely invisible now. So that was the first time I wanted to put a picture of myself as a child onto a pot, and I didn't know how to do it, and I was doing really complicated ways of trying to get it on, and Don Hall was helping me. Anyway, so that was the first time that I tried to do this, and once I started, it was like there's a lot of history, and there's a lot of invisible history. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of what I'm trying to do here.
Right, and I noticed that like these like cups, I think it would be a much more accurate description that you use. They are very thin. They're like almost like paper thin. Like they just like were you able to like make them like that when you first started out, or it's kind of like more of like a refining process as you go?
I guess it's kind of a process. The whole idea, I was pushing porcelain to be translucent. That's kind of what I was like. That was my subject. The fragility of porcelain as well as the history of ceramics. But with the images, they become kind of this almost paper memory. So in other pieces, I have referenced like an old photo album, which kind of closed, and so it was like the whole idea of archives and books is part of it, because we keep our memories, or we used to keep our memories in photo albums.
Right.
Now we keep them on the computer, so it's a different thing. But
yeah, and I think that is a great segue into this installation, because this is like the more of like this whole installation is a work, even though like it has like multiple components. You have like a series of cups here. We have like a video piece, and then also like the viewer might not be able to see, but we do have like 2 overhead projectors running with films, like overhead films, and you can kind of like see some shadow of them. But if you go back to the documentation photo, you will see that like this video is flanked by the 2 archival images. So this whole kind of like setup is itself a work, and it's called Trains les Arrivées, that you that you did at the Yorkton Art Gallery back in 2013. And how how did that opportunity come about, and where did the idea come for you?
Don Stein, the director of the Godfrey Dean Art Gallery in Yorkton, really likes trains. And so he wanted to do something about trains. I think he wanted to do a few exhibitions about trains. So he proposed, he just kind of suggested it. And I thought, oh, what do I know about trains? But I came up with this idea of doing kind of an imaginary journey from one side of Saskatchewan to the other, which is kind of underlined by the railroad workers who had built the railroad across Canada, and where so many lives, where Chinese people started to come to work on the railroad and where so many lives were lost because of this work.
It was harsh work.
It was harsh work, and now we don't even have, transportation across the country. So the work that was done over 100 years ago has also disappeared because we no longer have a train that comes to Regina. We no longer have a bus that comes to Regina. So it's like we do all this work to build a certain utopia, and then we start to dismantle it. So to me, that's really, we're undoing ourselves. So I find it kind of sad. So the idea was how I wanted to get the idea of a journey from one side of Saskatchewan to the other. I start with, in the center, my father, who came to Regina at the age of 12. So, that alone to me is really, really tough.
Do you know which year that he came?
In 1922.
Oh, wow.
So this is shortly after he came, and on the back of that piece is an image of the old train station, which was super elegant. And the way you set it up, I think it's really brilliant that you have the train going into the tracks going into the corner. Because when you kind of go down, my father is right in the middle of the tracks now. So, it's like he's coming, he's going. So he came in 1912, and he worked as, just in cafes, like he was the lowest of the low. He would wash dishes, he learned to cook eventually. But one year, and so there were fortunes made and fortunes lost. They'd lose money, they'd have to leave. So when he was 14, 2 years after he came, somehow all the money was gone, and they had to go to this little town of Consul. And they ran the cafe that was in the photo. Mm-hmm. And I knew nothing about this until my father was really old, and he suddenly wanted to tell me the whole story about how he came and everything. So he actually sent us to Consul, Saskatchewan. He was living in Vancouver then. But he sent us back to Consul, Saskatchewan because he wanted to see what it's like. And I took a picture of the little schoolhouse. With that, on the west side of Saskatchewan, Regina in the middle, I found out that my great swimmer friend, Lily Ting Lee, came from Yorkton, and her father ran the Broadway Cafe. So, as opposed to our family, which was quite small, she had a very big family. And so there was the Yorkton Cafe on Broadway Avenue in this photo, with the family and the 3 little girls. So that's my kind of imaginary, disjointed history across Saskatchewan, as well as the railroad workers, which are these still archival photos, with the moving tracks, which just continue on to infinity.
Was there so this track that we're looking at right now, were you able to find any information of was there any archival or document that that acknowledged that it was built or partially built by the Chinese labor?
In Saskatchewan, that I don't know. I mean, the images that they have of the Chinese workers are mainly through BC, I think, and I think there was some in Ontario, but that I don't really know who built the tracks in Saskatchewan. I think they were used for the most dangerous bits, to blow up the dynamite to go through the canyons, which is why so many lives were lost, because Chinese and dynamite kind of went together, I guess. That is part of the history that I think, unless you know to look for it, it's not been widely talked about, especially in more of the mainstream history of the building of Canada. Because I remember when I was studying history, there was a whole week focusing on the Trans-Canada Railway and the whole and to talk about this kind of how that connect the two coasts and build the nation, and then you have yes, and then they went on and focus on about
the Fairmont hotels, all the jeans and kind of like the lifestyle for the upper middle class who kind of like took train, Trans-Canada train, that like a leisure activity, like the group of 7, that was whole chapter of their life, about like taking the train or like being sent by the government of Canada, through the train to capture this like nature, the Canadian nature, but nowhere mentioned, kind of like who built these tracks.
The invisible labor.
Yeah.
Which built a lot of Canada.
So like when you went back to consult there, like were you able to find any like relatives or people that your father knew when he was there?
No, I mean, what would that be, 1924? So it was it wasn't a ghost town, but it's a pretty small town. We did stay in the old hotel there, so it's like those old hotels are also disappearing, and it was very, very quiet. And the train is still there. When we were there, the grain elevator was still there, so it was still, so much a part of what the prairies is.
Yes, and to be honest, like before I spoke to you to learn about your work and this project, like, because like I only lived here for like over a year now, so I had no idea that Saskatchewan has such a rich like Asian presence in history. However, if you're not from here, like there's nowhere to see it, or like even like if you go out on the street right now, you don't really see, like we don't have like a Chinatown here in Regina. Yeah. Given that there's a strong history of these people have lived and like gone through this place. Maybe like just more a personal question, like where did they all go?
Well, I guess the first generation which worked, like my father worked 10 to 10 every day except for Sunday. The generation that worked like that worked to give the next generation a better lifestyle, and so they did. So I guess where did they go? It was prosperity, and we moved to the suburbs like every immigrant, every kind of immigrant that comes. We start in the center, and prosperity seems to lead us to the suburbs. So when I was growing up, there were Chinese cafes and Chinese corner stores everywhere. It was because where the city hall is, if you can imagine, there was a little grocery store, and that served all the apartment blocks and like Balfour, and there was the Willingdon.
Right.
And, all the women used to know my father because that was the place. It was before big supermarkets. They were just coming in, like the Sherwood Co-op was coming in. So they were the places where people bought their food, and all that has changed completely.
Yeah, and I think like that just reminds me of this very interesting parallel history, because the current location of Toronto City Hall used to be also the old Chinatown.
Right.
So it seems, I'm not sure about other places because I only lived here in Toronto, but there seems to be this like parallel kind of like or like patterns per se of like displacement of the enclaves of ethnic community.
As a new wave comes in.
Yes, and new waves come in and kind of like just like pushing them. Maybe not like pushing. I think there's like there's like a push, but also this aspiration within the community to like move out of that. Like you want to work hard so that your children don't live here.
Yeah. So the good food in Vancouver, good Chinese food in Vancouver is out in Richmond, and in Toronto, it's the Chinese restaurants are towards the suburbs. I mean, there still is a Chinatown in Toronto.
Yes.
But everything changes.
Everything changes. Yeah. And recently, there's also like new development and all the like other wave of gentrification. I think now we have the name for it. That's happening. So knowing all of this, like how does that make you feel as a Chinese Canadian, or like what is being Chinese Canadian for you, or like do you only identify as like Canadian? Like.
Well, I think it's probably more traumatic for my mother, who came much later. She came after in 1949, when women could come in. So I think it was much more traumatic for my mother because she was coming from China and she had to adapt immediately to Canada. And then I was born. And I wasn't the kind of Chinese girl that she expected me to be, because I was coping with learning and living in Canada, and I wasn't quite being the kind of girl that a Chinese girl would be in China. So I think it's that kind of unease with both of them. It's like there's a lot of trying to fit in and trying to adapt, and it's not always easy. I mean, I think there's a lot of trauma for the people who come.
Mm-hmm.
There's it's difficult for the people who are born here because we kind of have our foot in these two worlds, and the dominant world is the Canadian and at that point very English world. And if my job is going to school, like that's what I had to do. So it's it's not easy.
No. Yes, and I think and I think that I could relate to a certain extent. Like I wasn't really born here, but just from speaking and knowing people from my community, I think that like navigating the like dual identity, is very hard and very like fragile because like it only takes like one thing, for you to be not like Canadian enough or not like Asian enough. Right, and I think that it's hard. Like I think like you always have to watch your back, like what you do, and like adapt yourself to different environment that you find yourself into. And in a way, I think it really like translate well into these cups because of how fragile they are, right? Like and the fact that you have this like image transfer onto this like Euro-Western tradition of like pottery, right, or like this object, is in a way, I think just from what you have told me, it looks like it represents you as well, just like transferring or like attaching over, and then have this like white porcelain, fragile like objects that's so close together.
In fact, I'm kind of twisting in French 18th century. The people who would be, the images who would go on to these, precious porcelain cups would be of royalty. So I'm actually, kind of subverting that a bit by putting the very ordinary onto these porcelain cups, because it kind of brings back this history and memory.
Mm-hmm. And before you set up, you moved away for a brief moment. Where did you move to?
In Vancouver.
Before you came back here to Regina?
Yeah, we lived in Vancouver, but we also studied in France, and we lived in London for a bit.
And how was that experience different from your experience here, like living in France and in England? Or was there not much difference at all?
Well, I guess I'll just go back to maybe the first time I went to Europe, which was I spent a winter in Portugal, and I for the first time I had a feeling of what my mother might have gone through a little bit. I mean, not certainly not as much as she did, but to be completely foreign, to not be able to speak the language, to kind of be misunderstood, because there was one guy that followed me for blocks. And in the end, he came up and said, "Did you know Bruce Lee was dead?" It was just at that moment. So it was just, it was just like, well, it's not important to me, but, it's like how people read you because of what you look like.
Right, totally.
So in France and in England, I don't know, I mean, basically, I was there to study. So I was kind of throwing myself into that, and if you're, certainly in France, if you're there to study French, you are les étrangers, so, you're already strange to them.
Right.
So I guess it's normal to be unusual, but.
Mm-hmm. And why is there like a French component in the title of the work?
Well, I really do like the French language, and I'm really enamored with France, but because we are a bilingual country, I seem to want to play with that in a lot of my exhibition titles. So the way I had it in Yorkton was, when you read the title, it's like train arrive, which means the train is arriving and that's what train stations do. But kind of like I wanted it to be a whisper, like train les arrivés. So it's like the people who are coming, and sometimes, you know, the people come and they kind of, they're more invisible, or they're not quite seen, and you know, lives are lived, and
Right.
so I'm just kind of hinting like that, like it's kind of this whisper on top of the big train arrive, which is what you really read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like kind of like this I think like in movie you're gonna see kind of this like expectation of like just like ghostly arriving of like the train, the kind of expectation.
And it keeps arriving, right?
Yeah. It doesn't stop. Yeah. It just like runs like right past you, right through you.
Yeah.
It's quite a haunted image. So I just wanted to check in real quick to see if you have any questions from the audience. Yes. Sorry, I'm just gonna go here real quick.
Jeannie, which messages have inspired your art? And then we have another one.
An audience.
Yes, we do have people watching us. Well, thank you, folks, for for tuning in. I just had a question from Trish Elliott. Which French ceramicist has inspired your work?
Which French ceramicist? Mainly I was looking at 18th century porcelain just before and then after the revolution. So there was an interesting moment where French cups, which were once very, very just for the royalty, suddenly became available for the bourgeoisie. And the same kind of flourishes continued, but they weren't quite as fine. And the other bit that, and so that's the early 19th century. And the bit that I get really excited about is porcelain of the French Revolution, the Commune, which was, you know, the proletariat revolution. And the images that show up from that on the cups is interesting too. So just like the revolution is like, you know, all the bonnet. I mean, it was just interesting what shows up on porcelain. Because it does reflect what's going on.
Yeah, like it does reflect you know, the cultural epoch at the time, and I reckon that like those later ones that you have just mentioned, they aren't like functional either, right? I mean, they could be used, but they're more for like decoration.
And they're actually more or less the same shape, but the images have changed. So it's like it's all propaganda.
Yeah, just like how I think in the 40s or 50s, where like department store give out these kind of like depressed like class.
And then
this
later,
set,
service stations.
Yes. Used to be. Well, I wish I still do it now because like I do need a few more Asian dishes at my place. I think we have another question.
Thanks, Trish.
From Nikki. I can like make it bigger.
To my favorite.
Yeah, do you want to like
So, sorry, folks watching. This is our first like live event ever, so we're just like figuring it out as we go. So please bear with us. But the next question. So Jeannie, you talked about the establishment of the railroad at an attempt at creating a utopia that we then dismantled. What would be your utopic version of Regina today?
Oh Lord!
A future open like a can of worms right there.
I mean, I think the frustrating thing about Regina is we had utopia. The most utopic thing that we had for me was Wasana Pool in Wasana Park, because we were creating a public space for all the people to become healthy. And now it's been a hole for a year and a half, and when they rebuild it, it's going to be half of what it was. And it's going to, once again, displace all the swimmers who are using it so diligently, me daily, for you know, all of the summer. So the reason we moved back, when when we were leaving France, the reason we moved back to Regina was because we had the RPL Film Theatre and West End Pool. So we thought with those two things, we can live a good life here. And now we've lost the director of the RPL Film Theatre, and West End Pool is a hole where the rabbits are living, and it's going to become a fun fair with water slides and water basketball, but it's not going to be a swimming pool for swimmers. And it was the only swimming pool for swimmers. So once again, the utopia that we had, and it was kind of the utopia of my childhood, where there were apartment blocks, you know, where I knew a lot of the women who were single, and I lived across the street from the old Victoria School, so when I was growing up, I would look at it and I thought, you know, I'm going to go there, I'm going to learn to read, and so I went there for 4 months and then tore it down. So it was also our own heritage. We keep knocking down our own heritage. So, you know, it was like, if we could keep that, and if we could have public transport, if we could have a public swimming pool, you know, and not sell our park off to banks and a tractor company. That's a little bit of utopia. Because we have great people here.
Totally, totally. Yes, well, we do have great talents here.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna...
Thank you for that question.
Yes, thank you. Just gonna see if we can get the next questions. Okay, I guess that is it for now. For our last question. Thanks. Right. Yeah, like, thank you very much for, like, you know, bringing, allowing us to have, you know, set up this piece again. It was, yeah, just like I said, it's so rich and it's so powerful, and you know, you addressed a topic that a lot of folks, you know, family experience, but like barely talked about, and you know, and just highlighting, you know, the labor of like Chinese immigrant into this like national nation building project, which is one of the themes of the exhibition. So thank you very much. So what do you have planned for the future? Like, what are you making right now?
Well, there are really slow projects which aren't really getting off the ground, because I've kind of become more of an activist since they tried to close libraries than an artist. But I've been wanting to work on this line about Zola, where when he talked about the beginning of department stores, and they were set up to excite people to buy. So it was like, I'd like to do something that looks at this rapid consumerism that kind of started then and has really taken over. Mm-hmm. Tying it in with these, Chardin did a series of cups that Diderot, or a series of paintings that Diderot owned. So there's something in there that I'd like to do, and if I could call it Babylon, I'd be really happy, but I haven't figured all that out yet.
Wow, it sounds very, very exciting. Yeah. Well, I think that's all the time we have for this opening internet event. Well, thanks again, Jeannie, for joining us tonight, and thank you to all of folks who are watching at home. We'd love to have you, you know, be here with us to celebrate, you know, all this amazing artwork and artists. But yeah, this is what we can do. So thank you very much for tuning in, and please keep an eye out for new updates on our social media for those who couldn't make it here to see the show in person. For folks who are able to, we will be open throughout the holidays with limited capacity. So please make sure to check out on the website, mackenzie.art, for that information. And until next time, happy holidays and have a good evening. Thank you,